In today's podcast episode, I am joined once again by my fellow Bitewing Games co-founder, Kyle Spackman, as we discuss many things board games, specifically modules, variants, and expansions, and when do modules and board games go too far. Additionally, we tease even more info about our upcoming Bitewing Games releases. My name is Nick Murray, and you are listening to the Bitewing Games podcast. All right, so today I am joined again, finally, by Kyle Spackman, the fellow Bitewing Games co-founder, and it's been a long time since we've had you last, Kyle.
I know. I was wondering what I did to offend you so much that I couldn't come back on, or if someone complained about me. So I'm happy to be back again.
I was flying solo for a real long time, but it wasn't real necessarily intentional. I just think I didn't have any good topics to discuss with others. And until now, we have something new that we want to chat about, and it's going to be, well, we'll get to that in a minute. But first, I wanted to ask you about games you've been playing lately.
Yeah, I've been able to play a few games lately. I've been still getting a handful of solo games of Trailblazers in, because I don't really play solo
Nice.
games, but sometimes my wife isn't in the mood for any games, and I'm like, I just want to get a quick 30-minute game of Trailblazers in. So I've been doing that quite a bit.
Which mode have you been playing different modes or?
I've been mostly for solo mode doing just the standard mode and just
Mhm.
trying to beat some of the achievements, because there's the achievement sheet. And so I've worked through a dozen of the achievements so far, but some of them are just kicking my butt. They're really hard.
Yeah, the worst thing about that is when you like nail one or both of the goal cards, and then you
Mm-hmm.
get to the end and score it up, and you have 49 out of 50
Yeah.
points.
Yep, I've
That's
been there
multiple
before.
times. Oh, it's such a
Yep,
tight
or I'm
game.
one. Yeah, yep, it's really good. So it's been a lot of fun. Another one I've been playing a lot of, lots of it's just on the app on my phone. I don't play games again on apps very often, but I saw Clever Forever, and I love the Clever series. I have all the Clever, or that's pretty clever, Clever Cubed, and Twice as Clever. So Clever Forever I'd heard about, and I was like, I'm curious, so I bought the app, and then I printed off some sheets. Can't buy the game yet; it's not available, but printed off some sheets to play, and I've been loving that game. That is my favorite of the four Clevers.
Oh,
Is
wow.
Clever Forever. So
Well,
I've been doing that.
makes sense. That's why I named it that way, huh?
Yeah, seriously. Yep, I love this one. So it's the most combo-rific, I think, of any of them. So it's been a ton of fun. The
Very
last
cool.
one I just barely got to play the other day that I've been wanting to for a while. My neighbor just got the Lost Ruins of Arnak, and I had never tried it, and I've been wanting to. And he said, I just need to figure out the rule book. And I said, I'll figure out the rule book if you let me come over and play. So I had
Mhm.
the first game there, and it was a lot of fun. I really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's a mega popular one. With a really cool presentation too. I like what they did with the components on all that. So
Yep. Very pretty game. Very kind of fun to explore something new. And have you played that one?
yeah, it's been a long,
I
long
was pretty
time.
sure you had.
Yeah. It was one that I liked, but it wasn't one that I was like, I don't need to own this necessarily, but it's solid. It's
I
good.
got home and told my wife, I said, oh, that was a really fun game. She's like, but Sam owns it, meaning you don't have to buy it. I'm like, I wasn't even suggesting that. I was just telling you I had fun, and she's already assuming I'm gonna fill up the house with more board games.
Oh, it's probably a safe assumption.
I was gonna say I've given her a lot of reason to believe that. So, well, what have you
Yeah,
been playing, Nick?
I've gone on a hot streak of not playing new to me games since I was just checking. It's been since the 12th, so it's been almost a couple weeks. That's a pretty good streak for me.
That's insane for you. 2 weeks with no new games.
Yeah. So but they've been fun ones that I've been wanting to revisit for a while. So like last night we revisited Whale Riders with some friends, and it was super funny because that game is all about you're collecting, you're going from port to port, and you're kind of sort of trying to race back to the start, because then you can just very easily keep buying pearls, which is how you win the game. um and there was even a goal card that said like race to the halfway point to get even more bonus pearls. And so I was doing that strategy of just like flying up and down the coast through these ports, and it was working pretty well for me. But it was funny because one friend, she was on like the third of all these ports, and then she just camped there almost the entire game. I couldn't believe it. And like I was the one drawing the tiles out of the bag, so maybe it was my fault, but like she kept like buying cheap, really good stuff, and then I kept pulling out like the best tiles and putting it on her ports. And none of us could believe it because we all left her behind on this one port to herself while we're all just like dealing with garbage ports after that. And she was just raking in like triple items and double pearls and wilds and stuff. And so needless to say, she destroyed us on that game, and none of us had ever seen one like that. I fulfilled one contract the whole game, which is pretty a very low number, and then she was just killing us. So that was a funny game.
That is
um,
interesting.
yeah, we also went to well, our office went on a trip over the weekend, and I brought some of our publications along with us. And so the other dentist I work with and his son came along, and so we were sharing a hotel room, and so we played on the ground in the hotel. We played Trailblazers, which was a good time, and we played Vadis 3 players, which was interesting. That was actually a pretty good game because neither of them had played it before, but I tried to like teach them some of the strategy and and not be like too mean, but still play, play my best. And we actually I tied with the other dentist at the end, and I barely beat him because I got into the star exhibit first. But he surprised me because I raked in, I think, 3 5-value chips, and then I think they all came out during that game, and he got 1 or 2 as well. And I thought I was crushing them, and we turned out that we tied, and it came down to a tiebreaker. So that was a tight, close game as well.
That's fun. How'd the son do? How old is he?
He is 9 or 10. And
Did he get it well enough?
yeah, he was doing pretty well, but later on he started, like, I was making him pretty good deals. I was like, hey, I will vote you through to get this 3-value chip, no strings attached, and I get like 1 or 2 points out of it. So he was getting the better deal. But towards the end, I think he perceived me as a threat, and so he stopped negotiating with me. And so yeah, I think he missed out on a few points there. But of course, if he would have made those deals with me, I would have gotten a couple extra points, and then I wouldn't have tied.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, but he did well. He kind of figured it out, picked it up quickly. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, that and a bunch of other games. So it's been fun to finally get back to older stuff in the collection that maybe has been played in months or a year or more. And because I am in the habit of just like acquiring new stuff and then playing through that multiple times to get some good impressions of it. But yeah, I still have a lot of games that I love to revisit. So
Yep, I love new games, but sometimes I fear the acquisition or the playing of new games takes away from me playing the same game a dozen times, which I enjoy doing too. So
yeah, and I know you and I are both going to conventions in March. Not the same convention, but you're going to SaltCon, and I am going to Dice Tower West. And for me personally, I'll probably take a couple new to me games, but I'm going to be taking a lot of games that I love and just haven't played in a long time too. And hopefully that'll be kind of easy to get into because conventions are kind of hard to like read through an entire rule book and learn a new game and then teach it to people. And so if there are games that you're kind of familiar with playing already, and if you guys want to try and find us, we're happy to. I'm just going to pretty much game with people, so with anybody. So if you guys want to look for us or message us or whatever, we're happy to get some gaming in March.
Yep, definitely. I'll be hosting a few events of our Trailblazers and Zuvadis, but otherwise I'm just there to play games, and I've got 3 Reiner Knizias on my shelf of shame right now. I've got Taj Mahal, Municipium, and Siege of Rundar. All of those are top of my list of what I want to play, and so I'm looking forward to getting those to the table some.
Yeah, I'd recommend Taj Mahal at 4 or 5 players. Municipium is pretty much good at all player counts. I've tried it at all of them. Although probably like two is really good, but most people tend to prefer it at 3 or 4. And then Siege of Rundar is pretty much good at any player count. So
yeah, I'm really excited for that one. I got that for Christmas, and my wife saw the box and she says, "That's when you can play with your board game friends." It's a little too nerdy for me.
That's actually a pretty good family weight game, though. I would say, like, be it being a cooperative and stuff. But
Yeah, no, I
okay,
agree. She saw the orcs and things, and she's like, pass.
yeah,
But I've been
that's
dying to get
fair.
it out, so I'm excited for that.
Cool. Well, yeah, let's move on to our topic for today, which is when modules cross the line. This is one that stood out to me because I've seen people I've seen people get excited about modules, and I've seen people heavily complain about modules in games. And I've been it's been on my mind lately with the games we've been publishing as well for a variety of reasons. Um, and so before we get into all of that, I guess we should start by defining modules. And this is even an interesting topic in and of itself because there's a lot of gray area here, I think, from exploring it a little deeper. So I guess for you, Kyle, what would you consider a board game module?
I was hoping you would tell me so that I could have some focus because I've been thinking about it a lot, and I don't know because I've thought of something as simple as Dominion having a bunch of different cards that essentially you can create different modules for the game with the different cards, or all the expansions for Dominion that is essentially I feel like you have these different modules. You're still playing the game the same, so it's a little maybe different, but something like Azul has the front and the back side of the board. That's a module in a way of the game.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is where the gray area starts to happen because it's like, okay, what's the difference between a module and a variant and an expansion?
Yes, I thought the same. I was like, those three words kind of just all blurred together. Like, are they different? How are they different? Are they just different by name? So, what do you think?
So, okay, that like from gut feeling here, I think about it, and if we start with variants, I think of like advanced versus beginner variants,
Mm-hmm.
or things like that, where maybe you go from simple to a little bit more complex, or a few more layers added on. But then modules kind of have a similar thing where, to me, modules change up the gameplay, or they introduce new mechanisms, or a new flavor to the entire experience, or maybe sometimes they completely change how the game plays out. But with expansions, those tend to, I don't know, typically those are separate things that you buy, right? Whereas modules come in the base game. So that's generally a good rule that you can go by, except that is broken even by us and by
Yeah,
other people, at least the way we term things. So I'm thinking of like Taverns of Tiefenthal. Have you played that one?
I haven't. It's a game I'd love to play. It's not like the highest on my list. I've heard good
Yeah.
things about it, but yeah, no, I haven't played it.
Yeah, from the designer, Wolfgang Warsch, designer of That's Pretty Clever, that you mentioned, and even more popular, Quacks of Quedlinburg. Taverns of Tiefenthal is very similar to Quacks, in being kind of a push your luck um, pool building game, except you're not building a bag, you're building a deck, and you're whipping things out. People that are visiting your like bar, or your restaurant or whatever, and you're trying to seat them at tables and such. But that's the way they set up that game is pretty wild, because there are, like, I don't know if there are like 4 or 5 or 6 different modules. And so there are so many different ways to play the game, and you start with like the base rules. And a lot of people, from what I've kind of heard, and this is a game I've only played one time, and I think we tried maybe a couple modules, or none of them at all. um but a lot of people say, like, oh, the base game's too boring, and then some people say, oh, it's best when you add in all the modules together at once. But if you do that with a newcomer, then they're just completely overwhelmed.
Yeah,
And so it's one of those weird things where it's like, some people want to play the game with everything included, but if you're always playing with new people to the game, then it's hard to do. And to me, that is definitely a game with a lot of modules. I wouldn't necessarily call them expansions, I would call them modules, just
yeah,
by gut feeling. But then on the other side, you look at games like Trailblazers and Railroad Inc. And to me, I would call the extra options included in there, the extra gameplay expansions, where Railroad Inc. has like maybe an extra die or two that you add into the game, and you're still playing the regular game, but then there's one extra little feature like trees or a river or a lake that gets thrown into the mix. And then with Trailblazers, it's kind of similar, where you have the base game and then you might add in the animal expansion. And the animals just add one extra layer to deal with of scoring, just like Railroad Inc. And to me, those two games are modular games, I guess you could say, versus games with modules, because they start out very simple and basic and easy to teach and easy to play. And then if you add one extra little thing in, even with newcomers, it doesn't necessarily overwhelm them. And I've had success introducing newcomers with the animal expansion included. And so yeah, that's those are some things that come to mind initially.
um, I mostly agree with Trailblazers. I think it's interesting. Sorry, I've had this 4-week perpetual cough. I feel like the animals to me feels like an expansion because it does add something, but the gameplay is the same. Where for the adventurers, I feel like you're actually playing the game slightly different. So to me, that's a
Yeah.
little bit more of a module because you are shifting some of the key mechanics on how the base game is played. And it's still a
Definitely.
similar idea, but you actually do change some of the core concepts of the game. So yeah, I agree with all those things. It's a hard line to draw, but either way, I think we can still discuss when we think it's gone too far or what we think's done it well.
Yeah, and Trailblazers has been an interesting one to work with as a publisher, just because just watching how Ryan Courtney, the designer, treats it. He almost treats it like a console, where like the base platform is okay. You're drafting cards and you are constructing loops of trails, and that's kind of the core common thread through everything. But
Yeah.
now he's been designing a third expansion for it that also feels very much like a module that changes up a lot of the game but still keeps that core DNA, which is interesting. It's kind of like he treats it like a console where you just plug in a new game to the system and then try it out, and it's a very different thing. But it's interesting because a lot of people, when we were sending this game out to previewers and stuff, you would get different answers as to which I guess mode or expansion was their favorite. I think for Rado, I think his favorite was the adventure expansion. Um,
Yep.
but then if you talk to Ryan and Tim, the designer and developer of the game, their favorite is just like pure vanilla Trailblazers, like nothing added on, not even goal cards. They just like to keep it to the pure, and that's not even like technically a mode that we put into the rule book, but you could play it that way, where you're just purely puzzling out loops basically. And so it
Yeah.
really just comes down to like your preference. And in my mind, it's not a huge deal. Like some people were like, why don't you just put the best way to play in the game or provide that in every version of the game? And it's like, well, it depends on your opinion of like what do you enjoy about puzzly route building. And if you enjoy kind of doing your own thing and not necessarily messing with other people as much, then you'd probably enjoy the standard game more, or maybe the animal expansion if you want an extra layer of strategy. But if you want a little bit more tension and pressure on you and a little bit more hate drafting involved, then you might prefer the adventure expansion. That doesn't necessarily mean it's the better version. It's just better for some people than others. And but I can get the sentiment, because I've come across games that have tons of variants or modules, and then I'm overwhelmed and I'm like, there are so many different ways to play this game. What is the best version? Like, why don't you guys just tell me what the best version is? So I'm sure you've had that same feeling.
Yes, I very strongly feel that way. And a little peek behind the curtain, Nick, you and I don't want to say disagreed, but we disagreed a little on it because I was pushing that way. I was like, I don't like when I look at a game and it's like, here's this way to play. You can play co-op, you can play solo, you can play the family-friendly version of the game, you can play the cutthroat version of the game. And I'm like, ugh, I can't play 5 games in one. I just need to know like the way to play it. It's overwhelming to me. So I give a little bit of pushback to it. I do feel like, from my perspective now, as the publisher behind it, is to me, there's a big difference of, hey, let's throw in more modes because we think people will like it, versus like, this mode is too good to not include, or this expansion is too good to not include. And that's how I felt with Trailblazers. Was I was like, it's not like I'm like, oh, well, this is the best version to play, so this is the only one we should do, and we'll just throw other stuff in to stuff it and make it look better. I was like,
Mhm.
there's all three of these versions are just super fun to play, and like I have such a good time with it, um, that I want to put it out there. So it wasn't to just make it seem better, but I was like, it's just what it is. Like it is good, it is tested, it works really well. So I feel like there's a big difference there. So I eventually felt like I kind of conceded or saw the light of where I was like, okay, I can see that having multiple versions or expansions in the base game can be helpful because it's just good.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely more forgivable, at least from my experience, when it's a shorter game and when it's a simpler game. When you have something longer and more complex, like going back to Taverns of Tiefenthal, that's a game that can be pretty dang long, especially when you add in all the modules and stuff. You play through that and you need, if you feel like you need 3 or 4 players to play it. And so that's even a more rare occurrence of like, okay, I need to gather a group for this game and it's going to be longer and more complex and the teach is going to be long. Like, what is the best way to play it? Because I don't have very many opportunities to get this game to the table, kind of thing. That's a lot more frustrating compared to, in my mind, Trailblazers, you can knock out a game in like 20 minutes if everybody knows how to play. And
Yeah.
and it's very simple, and so you could play multiple sessions in a row and just play like blitz through all 3 modes, I guess, if you wanted to. And and that's the equivalent of playing one long game. And so um yeah, I think there is some difference there, and but I definitely felt that too with like when I acquired Quo Vadis and when we were thinking about publishing it, I was going through 30 years worth of variants that people had come up with. Some of them were
Mm-hmm.
included in the later rule books, the later productions, and then others were just like fan made variants. And I was just overwhelmed. I was like, oh my gosh, there are just a million different ways to play this game. I just want to know the best way it. It's a 45-minute game generally. And same thing with even Bonanza. Both these negotiation games, when I was trying to get them to the table, Bonanza has a variant in it called the 3 new types of beans or something like that. And where it adds in more variety to the bean cards. And I was like, okay, so it says I can play it this way, but like, which one should I play it at?
Right.
And like we're gonna play it at, I think we were playing it like 5 or 6 players, and we're like, okay, what's the best way to play it at 6 players? And I think one thing that frustrated me was like the rulebook didn't provide much guidance on that count of like, oh, you should try this mode or you should try the 3 new beans type if you want, I don't know, a more cutthroat game or a more, relaxed casual game. It didn't give me any insight into like how it changed the experience at all. And so I didn't know, which option I wanted out of it. And so I know for me, one thing that helps, even when there's a lot of modules and there's kind of that AP of like, okay, which one should we play with? I think it helps to have some kind of guidance, and that's what we've tried to do with Trailblazers and even Zuvadis. With I knew that people, who are huge fans of Zuvadis or Quo Vadis would want to play the original rule set, and we of
Mm-hmm.
course we had several people asking if that was possible, and so I included at the end of the rule book, like, yeah, you can play the original classic game, but I called it like a beginner slash classic variant. And basically at the beginning said, hey, if you want kind of the more classic rules or something that's a little bit more beginner friendly for novice negotiators, then here's how you can play the original rules. And so just kind of put out like, hey, this is kind of a simpler, more, I guess, more pure version of the game if you want to try that. Same thing with Trailblazers with the expansion and stuff. For Animal, I would put at the beginning, hey, the Animal expansion is good if you've played the base game and you want to add an extra layer of scoring and strategy. And then the Adventure expansion is perhaps more straightforward, but also a little bit more tight or cutthroat. And just give people a little bit of guidance, I think goes a long ways in helping them not feel overwhelmed when there are different modules to choose from.
Yeah, I agree. I really do think there is a big difference in a 20 to 30-minute game versus a 3 hour game having these different modules, because especially the people who are going to be playing the 3 hour games, and this is an oversimplification, but those people tend to be deeper in the hobby and tend to play more games fewer times. And so it's like, I'm going to play this game 3 times total. do I need to have 4 different modules in that game versus someone who's going to play a 20 to 30 minute game. Again, an oversimplification will often be more someone that is going to play the same game dozens and dozens of times. I look at my family, who they would rather play the same 5 games 50 times than be around me and try to learn new games every weekend. And so I think to have different modules and things like that can be more beneficial, because it's like, oh, like you're going to play this game enough times. Like, yeah, let's try something different and new within the same game. So you're just slightly changing things. So yeah, definitely agree with that.
Yeah, I'm the type of gamer who likes to jump around and play a variety of games from one week to the next. And that's mostly just to keep me from burning out on playing the same type of game. Like if I play too many Euro games that are all about like economics and resource conversion, I start to get grumpy with board gaming. Or same thing if I play like too many roll and writes in a row, then I start to get like, I don't know, grow tired of it. Whereas if it's sprinkled in between a different variety of games, then I don't mind it as much. So yeah, you like when you are playing the same game with people who want to keep playing it over and over from like one game night to the next, I think it does help to have, if the game does have like little variations to it or modules that you can be like, okay, we played this a bunch, let's try this different map now,
Yeah.
or let's try this different, slightly different mode that adds this little thing in. And that keeps it, a little bit more fresh for me when I'm ready to move on to a different type of game, and give that one a break. So but yeah, it's interesting because I feel like for modules, my feelings on them go through the whole spectrum. Like there are some games like I've noticed like Alexander Pfister games lately, such as Sky Mines, and some of his more recent releases have had like these campaigns in them, and it's like he has like a very pure Euro game, but then there's like a story based narrative and campaign strapped onto it. And in my mind, I'm like, I have no interest in this at all. And so I try to just avoid those. And if there's interesting modules like buried in those campaigns, fortunately, they at least let you just go straight to those and add those in. But then you have like Heat Pedal to the Metal, that the hot new racing game that has a bunch of modules built into the base game. They kind of just took expansion content and put it straight into the base game. And I've loved exploring that and even showing that to brand new to the game players, such as the Garage that adds in upgrade cards, weather tiles that change up the map, and championship module, which strings together multiple races with sponsors and stuff. And so yeah, like my feelings go through the whole spectrum, right? And I don't think there's necessarily one right or wrong way to do modules in board games. But it is interesting to notice the pattern of like, okay, if you guide players through it, it helps. If it's meaningful and it's worthwhile, that helps as well. But when it starts to just feel like fluff crammed into there, and it's like this is a pure game, why are you adding more stuff? That can be an issue as well.
Yep, and I think in the world of Kickstarter, especially, I feel like there's a lot of the play on people's FOMO, and they want all the glittery fun things, and they want the 12 different versions of the game, even if they know I have 15 games I've backed on Kickstarter. I'm barely going to get to these games, let alone all their modules. So I do think there is something to the shiny glitteriness of the expansions or modules, but I think often, not always, I think you can often tell when it's like, oh, this is like good and intended versus this is just, hey, we're gonna throw this in because why not?
Yeah, I think, that's a very easy Kickstarter marketing trick, is just to be like, okay, let's just make up this little, extra module and just kind of try to graft it onto the board game. But oftentimes that can backfire, because then people try it out and they're like, this was pointless, or this made the game worse.
Yeah,
And if that's their first experience with the game, that's not what you want them to have. And so
yeah,
I know for us, we take the approach of like, okay, let's make the best version of this game possible, and then hope at the end of it we have like, some of those Kickstarter marketing tricks to work with. That's always nice. But if we don't, like, we'd rather still have like a meaningful and intentional game rather than one with fluff added on. And so it looks like Zoom is going to kick us off here soon. But we do have a couple minutes left where we can at least tease out, speaking of modules, we do have our next two big Kickstarter releases coming out later this year likewise have a lot of modules to them. So our next one that we're planning to launch this summer is a Ryan Courtney logic deduction game, which I'm very excited about. And it's one that is interesting in how it has like very beginner friendly rules, which are actually still pretty fun to play even when you already know how to play the game. It just kind of it gives people a little bit more information to work with to start out, but otherwise the game feels very similar. But then it even has advanced cards, which initially probably give people the impression of their brain's gonna get melted until you've played the game a few times. And then there's even a mini expansion added on to it. And so just like Trailblazers, Ryan is going to be giving people a lot of ways to play this game. And you haven't necessarily dug too deep into the advanced stuff yet, right, Kyle?
No, I haven't. I've played the beginner stuff, and I haven't had a chance to play some of the more advanced variants, which is good because, and I think I like that in games where there is essentially a beginner mode. Like, hey, for your first game, maybe omit these few things, but then once you've played it once or twice, jump in because it does add a little more crunch to the game, and I like that as far as modules or variants go. So
Yeah,
I'm
and they're
excited. I'm excited to try this, and
yeah, they're really cool. They're really cool to add in, and like how they slightly change up the experience of the game, but keep the core spirit of it. I know there are going to be some people out there who, because there are like different advanced cards you can add in, and usually add in just one type, but there are definitely going to be some people who add in all of them all together. It's going to be like the most brain melting, chaotic thing ever. It's not even something we're going to recommend in the rule book, but somebody's going to do it, and I can't wait to hear how it destroyed
they
their
always
brains.
do. They always want to push the boundaries.
Yeah. And then the other upcoming, this will be kind of probably a fourth quarter Kickstarter launch, is for Reiner Knizia's next epic tile laying strategy game. And this is interesting because it follows in the footsteps of games like Tigris and Euphrates and Babylonia and Through the Desert, Blue Lagoon, Samurai, those kind of games. But I own all of those. I love all those games, and even games like Tigris and Euphrates, it has modules in it. It has like advanced modes and kind of little mini expansions included in the later printings, and those are largely things that I and people I play this game with have never ever touched because we feel like there's so much depth to this game that it's like, oh, why would we add on one more layer when like we're still trying to get a grasp on all the opacity and the depth of the base game, right?
Yeah.
But ironically, his next game, we kind of encouraged Reiner to explore, a second game board and to explore potential like advanced modes and stuff. And he even came in when he first pitched it to us, and it already had an advanced mode to it. And so there are a bunch of different ways to play this game. I actually had to play test it a bunch of times with people to make sure I understood and grasped and appreciated all the different ways to play it. And so, but this is one where I feel like it's easier than Tigris and Euphrates to get to and try all these different versions, because some of them just lightly mix up the experience, just maybe change the board setup, and then others drastically change your incentives in the game and what you are chasing and what you're trying to accomplish. And so that one's very exciting to dig into, I feel, because it's a Knizia tiling game. There's already so much replayability just from the emergent player interaction. You could have the same board setup and only play that and still get very different experiences from it. But then there's all these extra little tweaks to explore, which I think is a lot of fun personally.
Yeah. Yep, it is always fun to have those different things to look at and explore, but knowing that the base game is good enough that even if you never did get to it, you still have an awesome experience.
Absolutely. So I guess at the end of this, Kyle, as far as modules go, it seems like we both feel they do cross the line sometime, but I guess we still appreciate them in a lot of ways too. So I guess what's your final verdict on modules?
I like I think my preference is variants for beginner and advanced mode. For, hey, this is the simplification, so if you're playing with your mom and she's not going to get the rules as well, here's a beginner friendly mode, and here's the advanced mode. Modules I'm okay with. I'm hit and miss. Sometimes I think they're awesome. It's probably, hey, if I really like the game and I want to keep playing it, I would love a module. If it's just like, yeah, I'm probably only going to play this 3 times, I'm okay with that. So, but I know someone else will probably play that game dozens and dozens of times, so I'm okay with it being there. I just don't like when it's marketed so heavily of look at these 20 different versions you can play the game. That to me isn't appealing.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, and I think we should encourage publishers and remind ourselves as publishers to, if we're going to have different ways to play the game, at least explain to people like what the target audience of each game is, what the intended experience of each version is, and what the purpose of each module is. Because then at least, at the very least, and maybe organize it in your rule book and guide people through those different versions as they play it with the same group, right? At the very least, people will know like, okay, I'm the type of gamer who likes a lot of interaction and cutthroat, or I'm the type of player who likes to keep things simple and light and just get together with friends and play a casual game. So this seems like the version that will appeal to me. At least guide people through that. If you just throw a bunch of things in there and say like, oh, just explore it, they're going to get overwhelmed
Yep.
and frustrated. So and that's something we can all do better at as publishers, I think. And so great. Well, yeah, this is an interesting topic to me because I don't think there is necessarily one right or wrong answer, and there's a lot of gray area here. So I was glad to have you on to chat about it, Kyle. And hopefully we'll get you back on again soon, because it's always fun to do these podcast episodes with other people besides myself.
Yep, always fun to chat. I don't like to listen to these episodes as much because I don't like to listen to my own voice, but it's fun to be on here.
Fantastic. Well, that is all we have for today. Thank you so much for joining the Bitewing Games podcast. You can look forward to a lot of upcoming releases, which I'll share about in the I guess the closeout of this. But hope you have a great weekend, Kyle.
Thank you much. See ya.
That's going to do it for this podcast episode. If you'd like to stay up to date with Bitewing Games and our projects, including the release of Trailblazers in the second quarter of this year, the release of Vadis and Gussie Gorillas in the fourth quarter of this year, and the launch of 2 more Kickstarter projects in roughly the middle and the end of this year, then I suggest you subscribe to our newsletter, which you can follow the link in the description of this podcast, where we keep you up to date on all of our content and our upcoming releases and projects. Thank you for your support. My name is Nick Murray, and you've been listening to the Bitewing Games podcast.